mover, and I always like when we have a new guest on, we always like to ask, kind of how did you get into aviation, and kind of what was your path to go from, probably a kid in college or high school to, flying probably the greatest electronic attack airplane ever.
Yeah. So it started for me when I was young. My dad and my mom were both Air Force. My dad was a pilot in the Air Force, and my mom was more on the administrative side. And my dad flew tankers, KC-10s, WC, and KC-135s. And so he flew big airplanes, and he eventually went on to American Airlines. He went to the National Guard, then went over and flew for American Airlines. And most of my childhood growing up, my dad was flying for American Airlines, and he drilled a little bit until he could retire. And I always thought, like as a kid, this is like well before 9/11, I'm 41, that there's we got to go to the airport, like what my dad would go do his bids at the airport, and I'd go to the airport, and he flew the Super 80 at the time, and I would go run around on the inside of the airplane, like, moving the yoke and doing all that stuff. And got to go play at the airport, like back before anybody, back when anybody could walk through security. And I would just go with him and hang out at the airport. And my dad loved aviation. He loved being a pilot. He was a product of like the Catch Me If You Can era. You know what I mean? Like when he started flying at the end of Vietnam, but like right at the end of like the pinnacle of aviation. So as far as like being like the coolest thing ever. Right. So there was never a doubt in my mind that I wanted to be a pilot. It's kind of funny. Like I really never considered doing anything else. I always just knew I was going to be a pilot. The question was just, how long was I going to screw around until I got there? I went to New Mexico Military Institute. It's a junior college and high school in Roswell, New Mexico, like home of the UFO incident.
Boy, intel on this.
Confirmed. Confirmed.
I can't either confirm or deny what happened there, but I tell you, there's some weird stuff that happened. There's the government, whatever happened there, it was certainly covered up by the government, one way or another.
There you go. You heard it first here.
Yeah, there you go. Breaking news.
When he steals the crop duster, he's going to be like, "Remember me? Hello, boys."
Yeah. But I always I went to military school for 5 years, and then that kind of like I thought I always wanted to go in the Air Force and go via the academy, because everybody around me was like Air Force and was like, "Go to the academy, it's the coolest thing ever." And I was like, "Yeah, it's okay, cool." But then I went to military school for 5 years, and then right after I got out of military school, I was just so over the military. Like sophomore year to sophomore year of high school to college, I was like, man, I don't know. So I went to Trinity University in San Antonio, and I got to just be normal for a couple of years, which was really fun. Did that, and I still had some money left over from what my parents saved up for college, and so I went to St. John's College in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And my undergraduate was in philosophy, believe it or not, and my graduate degrees in basically liberal arts. And then right around the time I was like halfway through the program, which none of this has anything to do with me being a pilot, but from what I can tell, the engineers, the nerds, the guys that are really into the beeps and squeaks, they're generally not the best pilots out there. But then about halfway through graduate school, I'm sure that's
breaking news.
Copy shot. Yeah.
Nerds.
So
that's neither of us. So don't worry.
Okay. Yeah. All right. But halfway through grad school, I was just like, man, I got to do something because I got bills and I don't know what I'm going to do. So I decided just to try to join. I wanted to join the Air Force. They wouldn't take me because I needed an engineering degree. I didn't have one at the time, even though I had, family lineage, all that stuff. I was like, man, okay. And I was like, well, the Marine Corps has got too much running. I don't want to do that. Coast Guard is like, I don't know. I like their mission to saving people, but when I talked to the recruiter, they couldn't guarantee me an aviation contract. They were like, well, you could just come and be a SWO and then see if being a helicopter pilot works out. I was like, nah, dude, that is not the life that I've chosen.
Terrible.
So I looked into, still a fan of the Top Gun original generation. And I was like, this seems pretty cool. Didn't really have any family or friends that was like a Navy pilot. My grandpa was in the Navy, but he was a boat driver like in World War II. So we had like family lineage in the Navy way back when. So I was like, you know what, let's just roll with it. Applied, OCS thing right out of the streets. Like the dumbest way to join the Navy is like pay for all of your college all by yourself. And they just get the 20 grand commissioning loan when you get out. You're like, sweet. And then just pay for your college at 2%, right? We all did it.
Yeah.
Nobody told me to buy Bitcoin, but I didn't.
Right,
so
right.
That would have been cool. So here I am. 18. Yeah, exactly. 18 years later, I'm still in the Navy, still trying to buy Bitcoin. Just not enough yet, but lottery scratchers didn't work out, and here we are. But looking back, man, you know, I've been in for just over 18 years now, and it's been a heck of a ride, and I've really enjoyed it. And I enjoy flying, but I've been a tutor, like for after school jobs, graduate school kind of thing. I used to tutor school kids, like high schoolers. I used to teach them how to, like, I actually taught SAT and ACT preparation courses, which is kind of random.
Wow.
Like the math and science and English and stuff like that. So I'd work with kids and teach them, and I really enjoyed the act of teaching. And I think like some of that you might see in the videos of just like breaking down concepts and explaining things. And so you've got like the flying and the teaching aspects. That's kind of long story short. That's how I wound up being a pilot.
We don't do that here. Did you have your license when you went to OCS? Like, were you?
No, I didn't have anything at all. So my dad, when I was fortunate enough, and when I was 15 to 16 years old, my dad paid for some private pilot's lessons. So I did quite a few hours and basically like a 170. And I did that, and that was a really good time. Never got my license. I got pretty close. So then I wound up going to military school, and I just never finished it. But I knew I did my solo. I did a couple solos, cross country solos, stuff like that. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I knew it was also expensive, because my dad made it very clear to me that if I was going to do this, like, I got to study and, you know, go through it, do it right. So I was like, well, if I get somebody else just to pay for this, that'd be a probably pretty good idea. So that's kind of why I started looking at the military. And then frankly, when I talked to the recruiters, they're like, it doesn't matter. At the time I signed up, at least, I don't know what it's like now, but the time I signed up, they didn't care. As long as you can pass the, AFOQT or whatever that aptitude test was.
Yeah.
That officer ASVAB, whatever it was, you know, as long as you could like prove that, you know, you're left from your right or whatever, like I figured it out. You know, I studied a lot. I walk like a chicken at MEPS, you know what I mean? They, you know, whatever. And they're like, hey man, you're good. So here I am.
Did you fly the T6 in pilot training, or?
No, I was the old school T-34. So I went to OCS in Pensacola. I was the second to last class.
Yeah.
Kind of
nice.
It's kind of weird because like you normally have like a candio phase at the end of OCS where like you're the on wing for the new class coming in, but we didn't have a new class coming in. So instead we were just like packing up all the furniture, putting it in Connex boxes because they were shipping the whole school up to Rhode Island. So like the last couple of weeks of OCS was just kind of a joke for us. We're just sitting around and the DIs were just, they're like, whatever, because they're all moving too, so they didn't really care. So they just took it easy on us. Had
the hurricane already hit?
Yeah, the hurricane hit about a year or two prior. So the base, Pensacola I wouldn't say it wasn't in shambles, but like there's parts of it that were still in disrepair when we were there. And I think that was a big part of why they decided to move it further north.
That's awesome.
So I just showed up and did the OCS thing, OCS out of Pensacola, did that. Then I went to Corpus, where I flew the T-34 Bravo. Flew that. I was one of the last couple guys, not like the last. I think they flew about a year or two after I left. It was the old school, you know, turbo Mentor with the ashtray in it and all that stuff. Just a junky old airplane. Yeah, I didn't know better at the time. I was like, this thing's pretty cool. But I had no idea what was pretty cool actually was, you know. But did that. Then I went to Kingsville from there, and as a student, went through Kingsville, flew the T-45. I started off in the Alphas, is the old school analog gauge Alphas. I never flew Charlies, so I flew Alphas all the way through. When I was there, they had Charlies. They were integrating Charlies, but the Charlies were few and far between. So some students would do Charlies like halfway through the program and finish them. Charlies had like the HSI, the multiple displays, like the analog displays is pretty cool. The digital displays as opposed to the analog gauges. But I flew just the old school Alpha. Went through there, did pretty well at the end of my class. And when I selected, they were like, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I really want to fly Growlers because I'm from New Mexico growing up. I thought going up to Washington State would be a really good time. I like the idea of the mission being the firefighter as opposed to like the police officer. So I thought that would be cool. And then they're like, well, we don't have a Growler slot for you, but since I finished so high in my class, they're like, we have a Prowler slot if you want to take that. And I was like, they're like, but if you take the Prowler slot, everybody's transitioning to the Growler because the Prowler's getting phased out. So it's just a matter of time. And I was like, all right, cool, send it. So they sent me up to Whidbey, checked in, did some of the Prowler ground school. And then about 2 to 3 months into the Prowler ground school, they're like, we don't need any more Navy Prowler pilots at all. So like you two, there's a couple of guys in my class. You guys are all just going to transition right to the Growler. So they gave me a month off of work while I just got to screw around, and then start up again in a class like 4 or 5 weeks later. And then I flew the Growler the whole time. So I only flew I went from T-45 to the Growler, then eventually back after my department head tour, back to the T-45.
When did you finish T-45As like as a student? What year?
So I commissioned. So yeah, June of 2010.
Wow, they were still flying the A models there in Kingsville in 2010.
Yeah, they were. They had, I think, about half A's and C's at the time. Meridian was all. Yep. I think Meridian switched first. They had the newest hotness, and Kingsville was just getting the leftovers. And then when I was flying, there's only a couple of classes. I think it was one of the last classes in the A model, and the instructors would fly the A's all the time, but a lot of the students would have to fly the C's the whole time. And instructors were just stuck with the A's, which is a pain in the butt when you're trying to get yourself in an airspace or something like that, because you can't just have like a God's eye view of like where your box is. You had to do like on this big ADI/HSI thing, you had to figure out like radial cuts and DNAs. So like, dude, there's some advanced mathematics required to keep yourself over a spot if you couldn't see the ground.
Yeah. Dude, on my solo, I went out, like I picked like a geographical thing, like a lake, and I did like tight circles over it so I wouldn't spill out. It's like, I'm not going to down this thing, dude.
Exactly. Just don't get in trouble.
Yeah, that's wild. 2010. Well, let me ask you, man, when you went from so you never even did sims or anything in the Prowler?
I did some of, so in order to be a Prowler pilot, you've got to do something. I forget what the school is, but we call it the beeps and squeak school, where you have to, it's like electronic warfare appreciation.
Yeah.
So we would have to go and do like, we'd have to learn how to do some of the sims from the back of an ICAP. It was an ICAP 2 at the time. Prowler, which was really ghetto. So I had to do sims. Like I learned like, electronic attack theory. So we had to do a bunch of that stuff. And then you had to learn basic button pushing from the back. Not that I would ever have to go back there and do it, but just to give you an idea of what the guys in the back are doing. So I did all those sims, and I was about, 2 or 3 weeks away from getting my front seat sims or eventually flights in the Prowler. And when the Navy manning requirement changed.
Did you find going from T-45A total analog steam gauge to Growler, like full digital, was that steep?
It was steep because I didn't even have a velocity vector, man.
Yeah.
Like, all these kids from Meridian were like, oh yeah, just put the velocity vector like 1 to 2 degrees nose up. And I'm like, I would like try to bring up the ADI. They're like, what are you doing, dude? Like no, like radar, as though like don't no.
Yeah.
And so like the landing pattern. I remember my first couple sims, like you need like, I think they're called FAMs or whatever they were called, but you take off and just go to the area and then come back and do the landing pattern in the sim. And my landing pattern in the sim right off the bat was atrocious because my scan was like nowhere near where it needed to be. You guys were like, man, this is pretty bad. I'm like, I know. Did a few practice sims, but then as soon as you figure out how to use that we had the velocity vector with the energy caret on it, like the little sperm to tell you exactly what your energy state is. As soon as you can really incorporate that into your scan, it's the coolest thing ever. So I was behind my peers for probably like 3 or 4 sims, and then we were all caught up and good to go. But
yeah, I'm glad I wasn't the only one, dude, because that really kicked my butt. Now, were you part of the first class to go through the Growler rag, or was had the rag already been stood up and flying, or did you
Yeah. So the rag it's VQ 129 was a Growler rag, and it is a Prowler rag as well. So when I was there, they were flying both Prowlers and Growlers at the same time, and it was Navy and Marine Corps Prowlers, and it was Growlers. Now, about when I was done with the rag, I think it's got to be around 2012 or so. They phased out Marine Corps Prowlers there altogether. They sent them all up to Cherry Point. And then the Prowlers, they kept around for a little bit longer until they finally, they kept saying that, they said that I was going to be the last Prowler class, but then eventually I wasn't. And then there's something happened in the very end with like, hey, we need like 4 more Prowler students, pilots. Like we just need them. And so they actually classed up a couple of guys behind me, like well behind me, in order to get them to meet those requirements. So when I was going through there, it was still the same rag, but we had both Prowler and Growler. It was a pretty big rag, dude. Navy, Marine Corps, Prowler, and Growler. But when I went back there later as instructor, and today now it's just 129. It's just the Growler FRS, what we call it.
Did you come down to Strike Patron 204 and BFMS?
I never did. No, not with 204.
Yeah.
Did they have the program? I mean, when I went through the Hornet Rag as a student, like it was pretty dope. It was pretty doped out because it had existed for quite a while.
Yeah.
I've always been like a little nervous of like a new platform coming on, new training. Like how was it, man? Was it pretty good, or was there still some like prowlerisms trying to make it into the
Well, it
Growler?
was weird because the instructors that taught us, they were all Prowler aircrew that had just gone down to 122 and just got like their basic syllabus to be NATOPS qualified. So they had like 100 to 200 hours in the airplane. And they're teaching me how to fly the airplane. And they were experienced aircrew and the Prowler, don't get me wrong, but they weren't Growler pilots. So they weren't, I don't want to say they're the best aircrew, but they didn't have the experience. They never deployed with the aircraft, so they didn't have a lot of experience. So it's kind of weird because we were learning from guys that didn't really, they knew the airplane, but they didn't know it as well as we would know it like today at the FRS, right? The instructors are extremely qualified. But also what we did is we just bastardized the syllabus from 122 and 106. So all of our syllabi were the exact same as yours. So for like contacts, owies, forms,
okay,
it was the exact same syllabus. We had the same slide. A lot of our briefs, they just crossed out like 122 and put in 129 in a different, the nines in a different font, like whatever. But it was the exact same syllabus. So we did all that all the way through like BFM and everything until we got to the AEA syllabus. And then the air ground syllabus is very different for us because then we focused on harm employment at the time, which is all we had. And then there's like this whole jammer and ES suite that we had. So now we focus on that. So that was our air to ground syllabus, is mostly that kind of stuff.
Did you guys fly them? Did you guys fly them slick in the FRS, or did they have pods on them? Or
so the Growler is really good at just like when you guys you can box sim and you can put in a code like a VF code, so that way you can just simulate whatever. We fly generally single center line in the rag, and that's just so we don't put a lot of stress on the airplane. We don't burn a lot of gas. Now, from the inside, from the pilot's perspective, although the aircraft doesn't handle the same as it would if there's like 3 pods and 2 drops, the normal load off that we would carry. It doesn't handle the same, but when you box sim and you could bring up all the displays, it looks exactly the same as it would if you did have pods. So we could do a lot of our training like that in sim mode. In the sims, we do, we'd practice employment stuff like that, but we did very little flying with actual pods on the aircraft in the FRS. And you do that mostly when you get to the fleet. And at the time I went through, that was basically a lot of that also is because we didn't have a lot of pods. So the FRS didn't get them. It was like, those are in the fleet. Those are for guys that are deploying, and the guys that are getting ready to deploy or deployed had the best stuff. So they were always giving squadrons getting ready to deploy and their workouts the good equipment. And the FRS just wasn't a priority for that, especially considering the airplane can simulate most of that.
Right. Did you, I remember, man, 10, 11, 12 time frame, they were taking Hornet guys or looking for Hornet guys to go up to Whidbey to kind of help stand up to try to bridge some of that difficulty you were talking about as far as Growler instructors not having a lot of time. Did you fly with any like just Hornet guys that were up there that were kind of learning the Growler thing? Did you see some of that integration?
Yeah, there was a few. I mean, I want to say it was probably about 70% Prowler pilots, and then the other little bit was the guys that just got. It was kind of a weird one because if you get, I don't think the big Navy community was a big fan of VFA guys transitioning to VAQ at that time. So they were the kind of the outliers that had like weird, career progression paths that didn't really make them make sense. And we had a SOW there, and the SOW was just all Hornet pilots. So those guys, they were really good at teaching all that, the VFA type stuff. They were really good at that, but then they didn't teach any of it. I don't even think they even learned the AEA stuff. They knew the basics, but they didn't teach any of that at all. It was basically the Prowler guys that were doing that.
So you went off to the fleet. I'm curious, man. So does when the squadrons transitioned from Prowler to Growler, was it basically 1-for-1 swap for airplanes? So, I forget, I think Prowler squadrons had like, is it 6 jets per squadron, something like that?
I don't know about Prowler, but Growler initially was 5, and then we kind of both squadrons upped it to 7. Yeah. So what happened is basically they're just phasing out the airplanes. So we gave some of the airplanes to the Marine Corps, and they did whatever they wanted to do with them. And then some of them, they sundown them and just put them out in the Arizona desert. And then so the squadron would turn in all their airplanes, and then they'd go to the FRS, and they would fly at the FRS. And then once they were done with the FRS, the last little bit, then they would take airplanes with them to their fleet squadron. Was kind of the idea back then. We had a whole bunch of airplanes that were guess you call it in preservation. They were like covered in like tin foil and all
Mhm.
taped up and stuff that were sitting out there. And we get all these airplanes from Boeing. It's pretty cool. I mean, even as an FRS instructor down there, I was an FCF pilot. And we get airplanes from Boeing that had like 2.8 hours on them just from
Right.
that flight,
Nice.
you know, from the 2 flights. And the MFDs were so new that they didn't even have fingerprints on them. It didn't even smell like pee in the seat or anything. You know, it was just like
Wow.
the jet didn't even have a number painted on it or anything, you know. And this jet is just like sweet. We do FCFs on those, and that was fun. But yeah, so it was. And what were we talking? We're talking about CQ, and we're talking about
I was just curious
how the
about
squadrons got their airplanes. Yeah, so they just got their airplanes once they finished the syllabus. Once the squadron, the guys finished the syllabus, they took airplanes with them to the fleet squadron.
Yeah, I actually did a tour of Boeing in 2010 or 11, and they were
Mhm.
building growlers. It was cool, man. They powered one up. I was like, it looks just like a just like a
It
Super
is.
Hornet.
The big difference is just like the menu button. There's just one extra menu that you push. So if you're used to
Yep.
just going for like
Yeah.
like 2 pushes, and then also there's this AA thing that pops up. You're like, ugh.
And no gun.
And no gun.
No gun. I was like, where's the gun?
Supercomputer.
Yeah.
No gun. Yeah.
Like, no, there's something up there, but we can't tell. I was like, okay.
Yeah. I never had it, so I didn't know what I was missing out on. But the computer it's huge. I mean, the computer in the nose is like 8-9 feet long. It does all the stuff that 3 ECMOs used to do, right? So
Yeah.
now we just do it with one EWO, which I don't know why we call them EWOs, but you know, one WIZO.
So you did a full tour. How long were you in the Growler before you moved on, and kind of how was that progression?
Okay, so I showed up, obviously went to the FRS, then I went to VAQ 138 for my first fleet tour. That was an expeditionary Growler squadron, so it's pretty cool.
Nice.
Which, if you want to be a career guy, it's probably not the best move to go exped as a young guy, because you want to build up boat credibility early. The last thing you want to do is be a department head in a boat squadron and not know how to fly around the boat, right? So I was, my wife was pregnant at the time, and we were having a baby real soon, and the detailer in the squadron was pretty cool. He was just like, well, there's a couple squadrons getting ready to deploy right away. And they're like, this is one squadron that's exped that's not. And you want to go there? I was like, yeah, that way I can like be around, you know, so sure. So we did that. And it was cool because the first deployment that I did in VQ 138, we went to Bagram.
Oh.
So we got to see what that looks like. Initially, we went out sitting on the ground and just flying combat missions, right? You know, as a new guy out there on the night page with the super senior department head, because I was like the brand new pilot. You know, we were out there flying combat missions, which is really cool because you got to see right away how we get to help people and what kind of things we can actually do. And it's not just, but we're not boxing sim anymore. We're actually doing it. So I got to see that right off the bat, which was really cool. A lot of guys didn't get the opportunity to get the combat, the green ink, you know, right away. And as a brand new guy, first deployment, come back with an air medal was pretty cool. Did that, and then my second deployment for 138 was the Far East deployment. So we were in Osan, and then in Japan. We were just working up and down the coast of Japan. We did some stuff with Korea integration and stuff like that. And I used to joke and say we were there for just in case something weird happened, that we were just gonna we were quicker than boats. You know, our contract was we could be anywhere around there in 24 hours. So we just practiced just being combat ready and integrating with the Japanese up there. After I did that in 138, I went back to the FRS as an instructor this time. And I was at VQ 129 for about 2.5 years. Taught all aspects of flight, had a good time. It was really good. Got to get a bunch of hours in the airplane. I was the NATOPS PM at the time. So I was the guy that was responsible for just the general safety of the airplane. I was NATOPS PM at the time. I don't know if you guys remember, there's the Growler that had the overpressurization incident where the canopy exploded.
Yeah.
And the two aircrew almost died.
Yeah.
Wow.
Were you there when that happened?
I was flying. I taxied back to the line. We just one massive line out there. And I was taxiing back to the line, and I see that there's a Growler with no canopy, with the canopy's not there. And there was a SAR helicopter really close to it spinning. I was like, what in the world? You could see that there was like pieces of stuff somewhere around there.
Wow.
And I was like, what in the world is going on? And they were just trying to get everybody away from there. We didn't know what was going on. I thought somebody I assumed like a maintainer accidentally pulled like the canopy, like blew the canopy, like that stuff happened. So it didn't occur to me that like, you know, some more serious than that. So we parked, debrief and stuff like that. And all of a sudden we figured out what was going on. We're like, oh my God, it was horrible. It was miraculous that both those aircrews survived. One of them did a lot better than the other. So yeah, I was in ATOPS team doing that. We were, when there's a lot of stuff with the Hornet was going on with the over P, remember the cabin over P, and with Super Hornet with the 8 Alpha 8, 8 Alpha 6, or 8 Alpha 6, whatever, the cabin over pressurization issues.
Yep.
We were trying to figure out how to solve that. It was a big part of trying to figure out what the solution to that was. Then after that, I went to CAG staff because I knew I wanted to stay in. Both my parents retired and I wanted to stay in. So I needed to go to the boat before I was the department head. So I was CAG staff. I went to CAG 17, the Teddy Roosevelt, which is where a lot of my videos were filmed. And I was CAG staff, which is really cool because I was an exped guy, so I'd never been part of an air wing. So like I'd heard about it, but I never really seen what exactly that looks like. So I got to be on CAG, who's the commander of the air group staff. And he's got a couple of VFA guys, an HSM, HSC, 1V, AQ, and then another E2 guy. There's about 7 or 8 of the JOs in the staff. And I got to just be and work for the commander of the air group, which is really cool because all the skippers and everybody else would kind of go up to like, hey, what does CAG think about this? Or like, what's really going on with this? Like you got to know more about what the air group is doing than almost anybody else. You get the high level meetings you got to sit in on, but also you got to see like exactly how an air group works, how the boat works. You get to see all the ins and outs because you're involved in writing the air plan, executing the air plan, talking to the CAG gunner and getting all the ordnance and doing all kinds of weird stuff, talking to the targeters and like figuring out like, because we were doing combat missions. So figuring out, do we have 2,000 pounders? Where are they? Can we get to them? Right. Like, stuff like we got to see like how all this stuff worked. It was really cool. So I got to go out there and that was my first real experience behind the boat doing that. And that was before PLM was fully redundant, what you call it. So like when we had to do their 25 night traps, so I had to earn it. I was a manual ball flyer for most of my time.
Yeah. Look at you.
So I got to, so now it's not a thing anymore, but I got to do that. So I did that tour and then they threw me right into a department head tour, VAQ 136, the gauntlets. And then I did finish up with that tour 2.5 years later. And right around that time, I was halfway through my tour, this PFI, professional flight instructor gig opened up where they basically say, hey, after your department head tour, if you don't have any interest in doing command, but you want to just keep on flying, we've got this deal where you can go to VTJ really? Specifically, and you could just finish. You can still get 05. So I picked up 05. You can do that, and you can still just fly VTJ, so T-45s. At that point, I thought it was going to be the T-7 or whatever. It was like, how much longer is the T-45 going to be around? The joke's on me. It's never leaving. It's never leaving, ever. So I got to finish up that tour, then go back down to Kingsville. And I've been flying in Kingsville now for a little over 4 years. And I've got about a little under 2 years until I can retire.
That's wild, man. I didn't know I had no idea they had a, non-career if you just want to stay in the cockpit.
The program just opened up. There was like, I was the second group of people. There was like this initial wave of people that went and got it. And like 3 months later, they had another selection group and I applied for it and I got it.
That's awesome.
I didn't dislike the idea of being a CO and I probably could have done it if I wanted to, if I really pursued that. I was just, people talk about how tough your department head tours can actually be. And my department head tour was pretty tough. And some of that was due to the personalities of the front offices that I dealt with. And I could see how unhappy those people were, to put it politely. I could see how unhappy those guys were. And at this time, when I was going through, you would just see the cover of Navy Times and like every month to 2 months, it's like CO fired for lack of confidence. CO, you just see that the CO is just dealing with all this nonsense, mostly with the E's doing stuff and like all kinds of weird stuff going on. And he's got nothing to do with flying. He's not even, and so they just seem miserable. And if I had to choose, like, could I get paid the same and not be miserable and do exactly what it is I want to do in VTJ and, or just stay, continue to pursue the skipper thing. And I was like, man, just the PFI thing is the greatest deal in the world. And this brand new program just opened up. I was like, this sounds like way too good to be true. Applied for it, just, sustained superior timing, worked out that I just happened to get it. And then boom, here I am.
That's outstanding. That's awesome, man. I can't believe, I mean, I guess kudos to the Navy. I mean, that's one way of keeping some of the talent from just walking out the door,
Yeah, totally.
Because I never had any, it is you play the game until you don't have to. I never had any aspirations of being a skipper, but I wanted to stay in the cockpit, but there was no way. There was no way to do that unless you like got out and then did the reserve thing, you know?
Exactly.
So,
and I didn't want to do a staff tour. I didn't want to do all that stuff like CENTCOM. I didn't want to go to Omaha or Tampa. I didn't want to do any of that stuff. I had a lot of friends doing the 12 on, 12 off for 2 years and doing all the PME stuff, you know, like I've already got a master's degree. Like I didn't have an interest in doing it. You know, I just wanted to fly airplanes. I wanted to teach. I wanted to fly. And there's this opportunity where I could just do that and didn't have to do any of the really bad stuff. And I get paid the same. So I was like, well, it's a pretty good deal for me. I'm going to take it.
yeah.
And it's worked out. I mean, I've been in the cockpit. I've been in the Navy now for just about 18 years, and I've been in the cockpit for the whole time. Never left, not one gap.
Bragging.
Yeah, it's awesome.